Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling something that is literally a universal, sometimes soul-crushing frustration for absolutely anyone who teaches, trains, or presents. We put so much effort into our lessons, right? We prep, we practice, we bring our absolute A-game. But sometimes, despite all of that, we just lose our audience. Well, today we're going to look at the fascinating science behind the 10-minute attention threshold, why students inevitably stop listening, and exactly what we can do to fix it. Section 1. The blank stare epidemic. Acknowledging the classroom reality. Okay, let's dive into this by acknowledging a highly relatable problem. Before we get into the solutions, we kind of have to look closely at the symptoms and just admit that this happens to the very best of us. Have you ever noticed students staring at you but not actually hearing a single word? We have all been there. You're at the front of the room, you're mid-sentence delivering what you think is a perfectly crafted explanation, and you look out into the crowd, and bam. That's when you see it, the classic zombie stare. Their eyes are wide open, looking directly at you, but you can tell with absolute certainty that your words are just bouncing right off them. The lights are on, but nobody's home. It's funny, sure, but it can also be incredibly frustrating in the moment. And it's so easy to take this personally. We immediately jump to conclusions. We think, oh, my lesson is boring, or we assume the students are just being lazy or unmotivated. But what if I told you that this completely glazed over look isn't a behavioral issue at all? What if, and this is wild, it's actually a deeply ingrained, completely unavoidable biological reality? Moving on to Section 2, the 10-minute threshold, the biology of attention. So here is where we get to completely remove the guilt. You don't need to feel guilty for losing them, and honestly, the students don't need to feel guilty for drifting off either. We're dealing with hard biological constraints here. The critical number you need to keep in mind is 10 to 15. According to our source data, most students can only maintain focused attention for about 10 to 15 minutes, period. That is the biological threshold. Honestly, it doesn't matter how charismatic you are or how incredibly vital the information is, after a maximum of 15 minutes of passive listening, it's like a biological clock just strikes midnight. And what exactly happens when that clock strikes? Well, brains naturally begin to wander. I really, really want to emphasize that word, naturally. This wandering attention is an automatic neurological response. The brain simply cannot sustain a high level of incoming, continuous focus without a break. So it's not a sign of poor teaching, and it is definitely not a sign of a bad student. It is just how human hardware operates. Section 3. Working memory overload. The bottleneck of long lectures. So the crucial point is understanding the why behind those wandering brains, because that's absolutely essential if we want to change our approach. We have to look at what long lectures actually do to the mind, and it comes down to working memory overload. Basically, a long, uninterrupted lecture acts as a cognitive bottleneck, making it much harder for the brain to absorb new information. Think of working memory like a tiny little waiting room in your brain. It can only hold a few pieces of information at a time while the brain decides what to do with them all. When you just lecture continuously, you are shoving more and more people into that tiny waiting room without letting anyone out. Very quickly, it gets completely jam-packed. And once it's full, it is significantly harder for the brain to absorb anything new. The information literally just spills out. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what that bottleneck looks like in practice. During those first 10 minutes, you've got active curiosity. The working memory has plenty of space, the brain is eager, it's taking in new data, processing it, and filing it away nicely. But look at what happens after 10 minutes. Without some kind of interaction, that cognitive waiting room is just jammed. The result? Curiosity fades and learning visibly slows down. They are physically incapable of keeping up with your pace because their cognitive processing is totally backed up. Section 4. The interactive reset strategy. Empowering the classroom. So what do we actually do about this? I mean, we can't exactly just teach 10-minute classes and send everyone home. But now that we understand the biological agitation of cognitive overload, we can empower ourselves with some immediate, actionable pedagogy to solve the problem directly. Our source material outlines 3 highly specific, practical steps to clear out that cognitive bottleneck and keep your lesson incredibly dynamic. Step 1, break lessons into short chunks. You've got to stop viewing your hour-long class as a single, endless monologue. Step 2, ask questions. And Step 3, include activities. By breaking the delivery into smaller, manageable pieces and throwing in questions or short activities, you are basically opening the doors of that mental waiting room. You're allowing the brain time to process the information, file it away, and clear up space for the next batch of learning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core mechanism of the solution itself. Let students participate every 10 minutes to reset their attention. The act of participation is literally a reset button for the brain. When a student answers a question or, turns to a neighbor for a quick activity, they shift from being passive receivers of information to active participants. This shift clears out that working memory overload, it re-sparks that fading curiosity we talked about, and essentially, it buys you another 10 to 15 minutes of prime, focused biological attention. It is without a doubt the ultimate tool to bypass the bottleneck. So this leaves us with a critical challenge, and really the ultimate takeaway from today's explainer. What will you do at the 10-minute mark of your next lesson? You know the science now, you know the biological limits of your audience, and you have a totally practical strategy to reset their focus. So the next time you're preparing to teach, don't just plan your content, plan your resets. I challenge you to build in that interaction and just watch as those blank zombie stares transform right back into active, engaged learners. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.